All right, Shabbos, say good morning. Let us begin another beautiful daf of Maseches Yoma in front of us. We'll begin by thanking our sponsors. To thank our Talmud Torah sponsors, Yona Shushie Ehrenfeld, for dedicating all of the shiurim and drashos this month in memory of Yona's grandfather, Yosef ben Shmuel Aron, Zichron Livracha. To thank our Week of Learning sponsors, Jack Bennett, in memory of Sergeant Nikolai Rappaport of the Givati Brigade, who was killed in Lebanon in a Hezbollah ambush on February 7th, 1998. Our Day of Learning sponsors, Seth and Rachel Rotenberg, in commemoration of the yahrzeit of Seth's sister Naomi Tova Bas Ze'ev, and in honor of Seth's completion of the Daf Yomi cycle. I think I saw Seth walk in here before. Right, Seth, Mazel Tov, and your sisters, nishmas should have an aliyah. Incredibly beautiful. And our Daf Yomi sponsors for today, Bobby and Lisi Lilienfeld, in honor of the yahrzeit of Bobby's mother, Madeline Lilienfeld, Migdal Bas Velvel Zichron Livracha. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, all of the neshamas will have an aliyah, all of the families in nechama and halabai. We should all be zocheh to continue on our path of spiritual accomplishment in Mirz Hashem for many years to come. So we also take the opportunity to, of course, recognize that today is also the day in which Yoma Zikaron is observed, in which not just Eretz Yisrael but Am Yisrael honors those who have fallen defending the state of Israel, those who have fallen to as victims of terror. And it's so important that we always recognize Va'amar lach b'damayi chayi, Va'amar lach b'damayi chayi, that we exist and we reap the benefits of so much because of the incredible and overwhelming sacrifice. So if you follow the news in Eretz Yisrael and you see the commemorations and you hear the heartbreaking speeches and you realize that literally, ein bayis asher ein sham meis. We think about these days of Yom HaZikaron and Yom HaAtzmaut for us to like a little bit more esoteric and detached. But when you live in such a small country, you realize that there is not a family that is not touched by these remembrances. There's not a family who has not lost someone or doesn't know someone who has lost someone. And we reap the benefits. For us, we're just waiting for the airport to reopen. So Mirz Hashem, we could go and we could enjoy and we could just taste the beauty of Eretz Yisrael. But it's so important to realize that gift comes as the result of so much overwhelming and heartbreaking Mesiras Nefesh. So take a few moments to daven for those neshamas who have left this world, Al Kiddush Hashem, daven that their families should, Mirz Hashem, be able somehow to experience some type of nechama, and halavai we should all be zocheh Mirz Hashem to go home bekarav biyaminu. All right, Debose, with that, let us begin. So today's daf is daf Gimel. We are picking up on daf Beis Amud Beis. Okay, I lost my bookmark, but that's all right. That's all right. It's good. Satan works in many ways. Good. I'm not going to get distracted. Well, I am going to get distracted, but okay, good. So let's. I'm fine. No. I never want it. I don't want it. I can't use it if it's not my own. No, okay, thank you. Fine. I'll use it. All right. So today's daf is daf Gimel. Thank you. So we are picking up Mirz Hashem on Beis Amud Beis, and we are picking up. I believe we left off Ve'ima Shmini, which is 2, 4, 6 lines up from the bottom. So we'll say, so remember again, just to reorient ourselves a little bit. The Mishnah introduced us to the concept that the Kohen Gadol is sequestered for 7 days prior to the Avodah of Yom Kippur. The Gemara then went on to explain that, by the way, it's not just on Yom Kippur, but in fact we find a very similar process by Para Aduma. Kohen is sequestered for 7 days prior to the Avodah of Para Aduma as well. Where do we learn that out from? So the Gemara explained that it comes from the pasuk by Miluim. Remember again, the paradigmatic example of Hafrasha, the paradigmatic example of sequestering is by the Miluim. Ultimately, again, by the 8 days or the 7 days of preparation for the inauguration on day number 8. By the Miluim, the pasuk says, "Kasher asa bayom hazet tziva Hashem lasos lechaper aleichem." So if you remember again, we had two different ideas in the Gemara yesterday. One of them was lasos refers to Para Aduma, lechaper refers to Yom Kippur. Other possibilities that we learned out from the Gzeira Shava of tziva. Okay, two different opinions. The Gemara now, then, I'm just sorry to give you a little bit of a background. The Gemara then goes, that's why we never finish the daf, but the Gemara goes ahead and explains that perhaps, the pasuk is coming to include something else. How do you know? Now, both remember, the fact that the pasuk includes Yom Kippur, I understand that comes from lechaper, right? I understand. Kapara makes sense. But how do you know that lasos refers to para aduma? Maybe lasos refers to a whole variety of other different things. So we're going through that process now. So the last piece we ended up yesterday is that maybe the pasuk is coming to teach me that there's an obligation of sequestering prior to the Kohen doing the avoda on Yom Tov, on one of the regalim. To which the Gemara now says maybe ultimately again it's referring to Shmini Atzeres. And maybe the halach is that before the Kohen does the avodah on Shmini Atzeres, there's an obligation of sequestering for 7 days. After all, depreciates Shiva Yom Echadu. That follows the paradigm of the Miluim, of the inauguration, because we'll say, what was the Miluim? 7 days of sequestering for 1 day of work. So too again, Shmini Atzeres is 7 days of sequestering for 1 day of Yom Tiv. To which the Gemara says, Donin davar she'in kedusha lefanov midavar she'in kedusha lefanov, vein donin davar she'esh kedusha lefanov midavar she'in kedusha lefanov. To which the Gemara says, no, because we want to learn out something that doesn't have a period of holiness before it, from something which doesn't have a period of holiness before it. And as we both say, the Miluim, the first 7 days are not Kodesh, the 8th day was. So too we assume the paradigm extends to that same type of model. That would exclude Shmini Atzeres. Why does it exclude Shmini Atzeres? Because we'll say, what does Shmini Atzeres come on the heels of 7 days of Yom Tov, Sukkos? So there's 7 days of Kedusha before that. So that doesn't really fit the paradigm. So we'll say the good part about this is what's informing and shaping this entire discussion is the paradigm of Miluim. Miluim, the inauguration of the Mishkan, is the paradigm for hafrasha, is the paradigm ultimately for sequestering. So just like that took place, 7 days of quote-unquote chol, followed by an 8th day of dynamic spiritual activity, therefore that excludes Shmini Atzeres. So 1 second. V'lav kal v'chomer, I can flip there on a second. Kal v'chomer, it's kal v'chomer. Hashta davar she'en kedusha lefanav b'ye prisha, davar she'esh kedusha lefanav lo kol shekein. I can make a kal v'chomer. If a period of, we'll call it non-consecrated time, requires kedusha, then certainly, requires hafrasha, requires sequestering, then certainly a day which comes on the heels of 7 days of kedusha should certainly require sequestering. So Shmini Atzeres should certainly require it. To which the Gemara says, no. Amar Misharshia, lo. It's always a great answer. Misharshia says, no, incorrect. Why? Because they both say hazeh ksiv. Because they both say the pasuk by Miluim that we keep on referencing says, kasher asa bayom hazeh, Tziva Hashem lasos lechaper aleichem, as was done on this day. So the Gemara says, Hazeh teaches me, Kazeh, that any time there is an obligation of sequestering, it always follows the paradigm of Miluim. If you take a look at Rashi, last Rashi in the Daf, Kazeh, lo hizrich pisha ela ledugmaso. Ultimately, again, I will say it only goes ahead and it only goes so. It's not just the pshat that we're learning out the concept of hafrasha, of sequestering from miluim, but miluim becomes the paradigmatic example. And only if something looks like miluim is there an obligation of hafrasha. So once again, Shmini Atzeres doesn't look like miluim. Why doesn't Shmini Atzeres look like miluim? Why not? Because again, Shmini Atzeres comes on the heels of 7 prior days of kedusha. That's not like Miluim. Miluim occurred, yes, after 7 days of preparation, but they were quote-unquote chol. They were non-consecrated days. To which the Rav Ashi Amar, Mi'ika midi di ikar regalo by prisha, tafel di day by prisha. Rav Ashi says, by the way, there's another problem. Does it even make sense to say that the primary Yom Tov of Sukkot won't require prisha, won't require sequestering, but Shmini Atzeres? Well, Rav Ashi posits that Shmini Atzeres is the secondary regal. Right, it's a secondary regal. It's not the primary regal. So does it make sense to say that the secondary regal of Shmini Atzeres will require prisha, but the primary regal, i.e. Sukkos, won't? It doesn't make sense. And even if you hold, according to the opinion, this is great, that Shmini Atzeres is a regal b'fnei atzmo. It's a Yom Tov unto itself. It's its own. It's not a subsidiary of Sukkos, but rather, again, it's actually a separate, independent Yom Tov. Listen to this. Halimili, this is great. Le'inyan pzar kishav. Everyone knows Shmini Atzeres is only a regal b'fnei atzmo in 6 ways. Namely, Pizar Kishav. Rabbi say this is great. What's Pizar Kishav? Take a quick look at Rashi. Let's just take a look at this. The pay is pious. So they would go ahead and draw a separate lot for who was going to do the avoda on Shmini Atzeres. Zayin is Zman, that we recite Shechem on Shmini Atzeres. Reish is Regal Bifnei Atzmo. It's not called Sukkis. It's called Shmini Atzeres. Ultimately, again, Kuf is Karban. It has its own unique Karban. Shin is Shir. It has its own unique Shir, different Shir of the Levium, different than Sukkis, and Beis is Bracha. So if you take a look at Rashi is Bracha liatzmo, Bracha shayim mevarchin letfilas chaye hamelech. Interestingly enough, on Shmini Atzeres, they would recite a special bracha for the king. So the Gemara says, when we say that Shmini Atzeres is its own unique Yom Tiv, it's its own unique Yom Tiv in these ways, in Pizar Kishav. Aval le'in tashlumin derishon. But I will say, but halacha l'maisa, if you did not go ahead and, let's say, offer up your proper sacrificial offerings on Sukkis, you could actually do it through when? Through Shmini Atzeres. Which tells you that what? That as much as Shmini Atzeres is a regal bifnei atzmo, it is its own unique Yom Tiv, but in certain ways, it is still subsidiary and tethered to the Yom Tov of Sukkot. So we'll say, I'll give you another example of this. Actually, let's just read this. Because we learn, Mishalo Chag b'Yom Tov Arishon Shal Chag, Chogig v'holech kol haregel kulo. If you did not offer up your Karban Chagiga, right? If you did not offer up your Shalmi Chagiga on Sukkot, you can go ahead and make it up through Shmini Atzeres, which tells us that as much as Shmini Atzeres is a regal bifnei atzmo in terms of Pizar Kishav, in these 6 ways, it really is still attached and tethered, and to a certain degree, secondary to the Sukkot. So also, I'll tell you also how this comes up, just in a very contemporary way. So Shlomo Zalman Zechatat B'Levracha discusses this idea. What happens if on Shmini Atzeres, instead of saying Shmini Atzeres in, Shmini Chag Atzeres Hazeh in Shmona Esrei, I say Sukkis. Do I have to repeat Shmona Esrei? So let me ask you this. If on Shmini Atzeres, instead of saying Shmini Atzeres, you say Chag Matzos Hazeh, do you have to repeat Shmona Esrei? Yes. Absolutely. Right? What if you say Chag Sukkos Hazeh instead of Shmini Atzeres? Do you have to repeat? So Shlomo Zalman says, no. Now, both say, the fact that you don't have to repeat tells me what? That as much as Shmini Atzeres is a regal b'fnei atzmo, le'inyan Pizar Kishav, it's still, at its core, at its essence, on some level, it's still part of Sukkot. Okay, good. So therefore, the Gemara therefore says, it can't be that Shmini Atzeres would have a concept of hafrasha. So the Gemara goes weiter. Ve'ima Atzeres. The Prisha Shiva Mecharu. So maybe, okay, so we'll say, we're back to the drawing board. We're just trying to figure out, in the Pasuk of Miluim, the Pasuk of Miluim is telling us that just like Miluim, just like the inauguration, had 7 days of sequestering for 1 day of service, so too there are other examples of this. So Lachaper, again, refers to Yom Kippur. Lasos, the Gemara posited, referred to Para Aduma, but the Gemara is saying, I don't know, Lasos is a very nondescript term, so maybe it refers to this. So we're just trying to go through the list of other possibilities in which the din of Hafrasha could apply. So for example, what about Atzeres? What about Shavuos? I will say Shavuos actually works. Why? The Prishas Shivas Yamim Liyom Echaru. Shavuos is 1 day, so maybe there's a din of 7 days of sequestering prior to the 1 day of Shavuos. Rabbi Abba, this is very interesting. Donin par echad va'ayil echad, mi par echad va'ayil echad, v'lafuki atzeres d'shnei elim ninhu. I will say the problem is, after we just got finished saying that the word kazeh or hazeh tells you that in order to be subject to a sequestering obligation, you must resemble the miluim. Well, in the miluim, the sacrificial order of the miluim, Rabbi say, was 1 par and 1 ayil, right? 1 bull and 1 ram. Shavuos doesn't have those karbanos. Shavuos actually has 2 rams. So now, interesting, Yom Kippur does have one bull and 1 ram, but Shavuos does not. So that's a pretty good reason to indicate to us that Shavuos, therefore, does not have the hafrasha requirement. So that makes sense according to the opinion who says that on Yom Kippur you only offer up 1 ram. But according to the opinion who says that halacha l'maisa Yom Kippur has 2 rams, so then Yom Kippur is not comparable to Miluim as well. The Sanya Rebbe Omer Rebbe says, Ayul Echad, Hua Amar Kan, Hu ha'amar b'chomesh ha'pikudim. So Rabbi say, interestingly enough, the sacrificial order of Yom Kippur is mentioned in two places. So the Gemara says, the Rebbe holds that it's the same ayil. Even though it mentions the ayil in two different places, it's the same ram. Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Shimon Omer, Shnei Elim Heim. It's actually two rams. Echad ha'amar kan, one said over here, and ultimately again, Echad ha'amar b'chomesh ha'pikudim, and one mentioned in Bamidbar. Shabbos say, so if that's the case, that it's two rams, then 1 second. Now, forget about Shavuos. Who's to say that Yom Kippur could even be learned out from the Miluim, that it has a sequestering obligation, if the sacrificial service of Yom Kippur does not resemble the Miluim? To which the Gemara says, no. Afilu tim Rabbi Eliezer ben Shimon. Even according to Rabbi Eliezer ben Shimon, who holds that Yom Kippur has two rams, it's still comparable to the Miluim. Why? Hasam chad lechovas hayom v'chad lemusafin. Both say by Yom Kippur, even if you hold that there are two rams, one was for the sacrifice of the day, and one was for the karban musaf. La fuki atzeres, this comes to exclude atzeres, ditarvaihu chovas hayom ninhu. Where both rams ultimately again were the obligatory offering of the day, which makes it separate and distinct from the miluim, and therefore cannot be learned out from the miluim for a sequestering obligation. Good. The Emo Rosh Hashanah. So we'll say maybe Rosh Hashanah. So again, I will say we're just trying to figure out. You're telling me again that Miluim is the paradigm for sequestering prior to Avoda. Lasos lechaper teaches me Yom Kippur. Lasos is open to teach me something else. Maybe he's coming to teach me Rosh Hashanah. That before the Kohen does the Avoda on Rosh Hashanah, you need 7 days of sequestering. And the paradigm actually works here as well. The Emo Rosh Hashanah, the Prisha Shiva Liyom Echadu. Rosh Hashanah is 1 day. Remember, the fact that we practically celebrate Rosh Hashanah for 2 days, that's a calendrical issue, right? Even in Eretz Yisrael. But Lamaisa, Rosh Hashanah as a Yom Tov is 1 day. So why maybe Lasso comes to teach you Rosh Hashanah and tells you that before the Avodah of Rosh Hashanah, you need 7 days of sequestering for 1 day of service. Rabbi Avo, listen to this. Donin par ve'ayil shalo, mi par ve'ayil shalo. I will say, we learn out in the Miluim, not only did the Kohen, in this case the Kohen Gadol, not only did the Kohen Gadol go ahead and offer up a par and an ayil, but the par and the ayil were his. In other words, the sacrifices actually came from Aaron's own pocket. He paid for the par and the ayil. So the Gemara says, in order to be true to the paradigm of Miluim, you need a couple of criteria. Number one is that it has to be 7 days of prep, quote unquote, 7 days of sequestering for 1 day of service. Okay, so Rosh Hashanah meets that criteria as well. But number two is it has to have a par and an ayil. Good, so far so good. Rosh Hashanah meets that as well. Number three, now the Gemara introduces, by Miluim, Aaron paid out of his own pocket for the par and the ayil. So too, again, the only other Yom Tov which could be included, or other day would be a day, not only will you bring a par and an ayil, but you bring a par and an ayil from your own pocket. Both say, take a look at Rashi, last Rashi, done in par shalo. Rashi says, the Miluim mishalohu. From the Miluim, this is very interesting, Aaron paid for the par and the ayil out of his own pocket. The Rashi says, "Dichsiv kach lecha egel." The pasuk says kach lecha, and interesting. I was going to get into this discussion. The Gemara understands that lecha means you have to pay for it. You have to pay for it. Ubiyom kippurim nami ika par va'ayil mishalo bezos yavo Aaron al kodesh bepar ben bakar lafuke atzar shashana titzibur ninu. Sefer Rabbi said the Gemara wants to suggest if you look at Miluim and you look at Yom Kippur, interestingly enough, the sacrifices not only come from the Kohen Gadol, but they come out of his own pocket. Therefore, again, perhaps the only time you have a din of sequestering is again 7 days for 1 day. That's one. Number two, par and ayil. And number three, Mishalah comes out of his pocket. But by Rosh Hashanah, and by extension Rashi throws in here Shavuos, they're karbanos sibur. Ultimately, again, the karbanos come not from the Kohen's pocket, but ultimately, again, from the tzibur, to which the Gemara says, Lafuke asas Rosh Hashanah, the tzibur ninu. So hani chalaman damar. So this works according to the opinion that says, say thank you so much. I'm going to be good for the rest of the day now. So the Gemara says, so we'll say that works well according to the opinion who says that whenever the Torah says, kach lecha, take for you, Take for you means really take from your own funds. Mishalcha, Amud Beis, va'asei, and whenever the Torah says asei, make for you, that also means mishalcha. So we'll say this is very interesting because we find this type of verbiage in the Torah. For example, Rashi quotes by the Chatzotzros, right? When HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells Moshe Rabbeinu to fashion the trumpets. So the Torah says asei lecha. So kach lecha. So there's an opinion that holds that whenever you find that lashon, what that's saying is not only should you do it, but you need to pay for it. You need to pay for it. I will say, but there's another opinion. And the other opinion holds that halacha l'maaseh, no. Kach lecha and asei lecha means you have to do it, you have to choreograph it, but the money comes from the tzibor. So ultimately, and I will say, if that's the case, then even by the miluim, by the inauguration, by the paradigmatic example, it's true. Aaron's going to bring a parent, Aaron's going to bring an ayil, but it's not from his own money, it's from the tzibor. To which the Gemara says, Desanya, kach lecha mishalcha, va'asei lecha mishalcha. When the Torah says, take for you, and when the Torah says, that means mishalcha, that means from your own money. Asei lecha, make for yourself, mishalcha, that means from your own money. V'yekhu eilecha, when the Torah uses a lashon of, they shall bring to you, or they shall take for you, ultimately again, mishal tzibor. That refers from communal money. Dear Rabbi Yoshia. So we'll say, Rabbi Yoshia is of the opinion that we distinguish between these lashonos. Kach lecha, asei lecha, means you pay for it yourself. Right? V'yikhu eilecha, they will bring to you. Ultimately, again, means from Sibra money, which I will say is something so fascinating. Think about this for just a moment, right? So the Rabbi Yoshia is saying that think of this, that Aaron HaKohen on the day of the inauguration of the Mishkan has to pay for his own karbanos. Right? Isn't this incredible? We'll say, by the way, what's also the chiddush to your city? So okay, maybe it was a money issue. Was it a money issue? No, remember again, Moshe Rabbeinu has to put out the call to Klal Yisrael to say what? Stop bringing. So we'll say, so what's the pshat? Right? Moshe Rabbeinu has to pay for the trumpets? He has to pay for the trumpets? Right? What are you talking about? The Moshe Rabbeinu is Kulo Klal Yisrael. He doesn't have a corporate card, right? The tzibur doesn't pay for this. So I'll say, I think, according to Rabbi Yoshia, is teaching an incredible yesod. That in general, the way people work, is that how do you know when you're really vested in something? How do you know when you're really vested in something? When you pay for it. When you are financially vested, also think about this in life. The things that we are most vested in life are not dafka the things that we spend a lot of time on. They're the things we spend a lot of money on. Because at the end of the day, where you put your money really highlights where your priorities are and what's important to you. And I think what HaKadosh Baruch Hu was, according to Rabbi Yoshia, HaKadosh Baruch Hu was telling Moshe Rabbeinu and telling Aaron HaKohen, you need to put your money in the Mishkan. You need to put your money in the Klal, because you're going to set an example for Klal Yisrael that when something is important enough for you, it becomes a financial priority. So it's an incredible yesod. It's not a money issue. It's amazing. There was plenty of money. It's not too often that Jewish organizations can make statements like that. There was plenty of money. I will say, in the Mishkan, in the desert, Baruch Hashem, there was plenty of money, right? Remember, no expenses. They had the man, they had the be'er, their clothing was, what's the word? Dry cleaned and grew with them. They were mamish, no expenses. They had all of the riches of Egypt. But Rabbi Yoshia says, Torah is teaching us an incredible idea. A lot of times we talk about things that are important to us, but if you mamish want to see what's important to a person, look where they put their money. And Moshe Rabbeinu, you got to make the chatzos roast yourself. Aaron HaKohen, you got to buy the karbanos yourself, because you're going to show the people that the Mishkan is a financial priority. And if the Mishkan is a financial priority, that means that it occupies a central place in your life. Klal Yisrael is a central priority. How do I know? Because I'm investing my money in Klal Yisrael. Incredible yisod. Rabbi Yochanan says, Ben kach lecha, ben v'yikchu elecha mishal tzibur. Rabbi Yochanan disagrees. And Rabbi Yochanan holds that halacha l'maisa, not true, right? There's no distinction. Rabbi Yochanan says the Torah sometimes just uses different wording, but whether it's kach lecha, yikchoi lecha, it comes from the tzibur. There's no such thing as Aaron paying for his own karbanos, or no such thing as, well, again, we'll say, obviously, if Aaron's going to bring his own karbanos, that's of course something else, but anything that is part of the, we'll called choreographed sacrificial order of the Mishkan is going to come from communal funds. Umat hamalomar kach lecha sa'ay Rabbi Yochanan. See, according to Rabbi Yoshia, I understand why the Torah uses different phrases for different things. Right? Sometimes it'll say kach lecha, asay lecha, and v'yikoi lecha, because sometimes the leader has to pay for it himself, and sometimes it comes from communal funds. I understand. Rabbi Yochanan says there's no such distinction. Everything comes from communal funds. So why does the Torah use the possessive? So then why say the yichoi lecha if you don't mean it? Why say asay lecha if it's not true? What's the pshat? This is incredible. Kiviyachol, so it's as if HaKadosh Baruch Hu was saying, sometimes to Moshe, sometimes to Aaron, Mishalcha ani rotze Yosef mishalohem. So I will say, this is very interesting. According to Rabbi Yochanan, sometimes when the Ribono Shel Olam gets upset with Klal Yisrael, he says to Moshe Rabbeinu, you know what? I only want your offering. I don't want anything from them. So it's more an expression, according to Rabbi Yochanan, of divine displeasure. So when you say the Yikhu Elecha, those were moments when HaKadosh Baruch Hu was happy with the klal. But when you see Asay Lecha, or Asay Lecha, or what was the other one? Kach Lecha, that was HaKadosh Baruch Hu Kiviyachal expressing his displeasure with the klal. I don't want their money. I don't want their money. I'm unhappy with them. I don't want to. I love you. I love you. So you do. You serve. You work. I'll take from you. I don't want to take from them. Take a look for a moment at the top Rashi. Kiviyachol ani shamati. So Rashi says, Im haya tzibor yachol lis kaper b'shal yachid hayisi rotze vani omer lefisha davar kashu lomer shakadosh baruch hu katz b'Yisrael. Omer kiviyachol koloma al karchinu yomar kain kilu efshar lomar kain v'chein b'chol kiviyachol shebashas. So again, so Rashi explains over here is kiviyachol if HaKadosh Baruch Hu is saying in a state of displeasure or divine anger, I'm disappointed in them. So we'll say, sometimes when you have a falling out with someone and they give you something, you're like, no, thank you. It's okay. It's okay. I appreciate it, but I'd rather not have that from you. So Avdil, sometimes HaKadosh Baruch Hu gets upset with Klal Yisrael. He says, Moshe, I'll take it from you. Aaron, I'll take it from you, but I don't want it from the Klal. Abba Chana Ar Mishur Rabbi Elazar, Kasav Echad Omer, V'asisa Lecha Aronetz, the Kasav Echad Omer, V'asu Aronetz Eshitim. So we'll say, sometimes you actually have these two Lashonos in one context. For example, by the Aron, right? By the creation of the ark. So the Torah says, first pasuk says, V'asisa Lecha Aronetz. God talking to Moshe, make for yourself an ark. And then it says, Va'asu Aron Etzeshim, they will make an ark. So which one is it? Is it Moshe or is it Klal Yisrael? Okay, so here we go. Bizman she Yisrael osin ritzono shamakom kan bizman she'in osin ritzono shamakom. So we'll say we see this discussion. In other words, the HaKadosh Baruch Hu is saying, at times when you are doing my will, so I'm so happy to receive everything from you. That's asu aronas eshitim. But at times when you are not following my will, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, it's okay, keep your money. I'll take the Aron from Moshe. Which I will say is something really, really incredible. What HaKadosh Baruch Hu is saying to us is at the end of the day, the things we give are meaningful, ultimately, again, where they're accompanied by a true allegiance and fidelity to the Ribono Shel Olam. But if at the end of the day I'm giving of my money, but I'm not giving of my heart, I'm not giving of my soul to the Ribono Shel Olam, to a certain degree, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, it's okay, I don't need it. An incredible yisod. So the Gemara says, Ad kan lo pligi ela bikichos da'almo, vasios da'almo. So the Gemara says, really, Rabbi Yoshia and Rabbi Yochanan are not arguing when you see a stam kicha or a stam asiya. We'll see what that means in just a moment. The Gemara says, for example, kichos da'alma. So we'll say when it says kichos da'alma, kach lecha samim, asiyos da'alma, asay lecha shtei chatzos ros kesef. Aval hanach perushe kamefarish de mishalchahu. So we'll say it's very interesting. So the machlokes Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Yoshia is in certain situations where you have kach lecha, asay lecha, But the Gemara now posits there are certain circumstances where everyone will agree that the particular offering in question had to come from private funds. What are examples of that? Examples of say Yom Kippur and the Miluim. Yom Kippur and the Miluim, that both by Yom Kippur and the Miluim, everyone agrees that it had to come from private funds. That the karbanos of Aaron, the Kohen Gadol Yom Kippur, came from his own money. That the karbanos of the Miluim ultimately again came from, Aaron, the Kohen Gadol's own money. So the Gemara says, listen to this, because Hanach, Yom Kippur, Miluim, Parushe Kamefarish to Mishachahu. As Rabbi say, by Miluim and Yom Kippur, the pasuk is explicit that it comes from the Kohen's own money. So the Gemara says, where do we see this? The Gemara says, "B'Miluim michtei ksiv aval b'nei Yisrael tedaber aleimor kichu sirizim lechatos." Because by Miluim, what does it say? Speak to the Jewish people, tell them to take a seir izim as a chatos, and then it says, "Vayomer al Aaron kach lecha egel ben bakar lechatos." Then the pasuk says, and tell Aaron, take for yourself an egel ben bakar, a calf, as a chatos. So the Gemara says, Lamali, Shmamina kach lecha mishal chahu. So Rabbi say, what's interesting about this is as follows. That halacha l'maisa, the Gemara suggests, the fact that you see a contrast over here. You see HaKadosh Baruch Hu giving one instruction to Klal Yisrael and another instruction ultimately again to Aaron HaKohen. And when that is phrased to Aaron HaKohen, the pasuk that's used, the phrase that's used is kach lecha. Everyone agrees that by the Miluim, there was the communal offering and there was the personal offering. And Aaron's personal offering had to come from his own money. And the Gemara is positing now that everyone agrees with this concept. I will say, by the way, it also works very beautifully. Remember, what does Rashi comment on this pasuk of Kach Lecha Egel Ben Bakar, the Chatos, right? So remember, not Rashi, but Rashi and Chumash. Rashi and Chumash says, why Egel Ben Bakar? Lechaper, al maise egel azar, lechaper al chatas egel. Right? That interestingly enough, this personal offering of Aaron was there as an atonement, ultimately for Aaron's participation and to a certain degree enabling of the sin of the golden calf. So if you go with this idea, then halacha l'maisa, it's Aaron's carbon and it comes from Aaron's money. So the Gemara is suggesting everyone agrees with that. So the Gemara says, for example, B'Yom Kippurim, what about in Yom Kippur? Everyone also agrees that their carbon comes from the Kohen's personal funds, because that's what by Yom Kippur what happens. Michtei ksiv or bezos yavo Aaron ala kodesh befar ben bakar lechatos. So the pasuk says, with this, Aaron will come to the kodesh, will come to the kodesh befar ben bakar lechatos, with a cow for a chatos. And then it says, Ume'eis adas b'nei Yisrael, yikach shnei si'irei izim lechatos, v'ikrives parachatas, asher, so we'll say, then the pasuk says, and from b'nei Yisrael, you'll take two goats for chatos, and then the pasuk says, v'hikriv es parachatas asher lo. He will offer the parachatas which is his. So the Gemara says, Lamali, why do I need that phrase? You already told me about the parachatas of the Kohen. Why do you have to add in there that Aaron will offer up the chatas that is his? Why do you need that? Shmamina, hailo mishalohu. Because once again, Abosai, that additional possessive phrase, asher lo, comes to teach me that what? That halacha l'maisa, the par must come from Aaron's own funds. So Abosai, what comes out of here is something very interesting. So the Gemara introduces us, first of all, it's really quite riveting, the machlokes Rabbi Yoshia and Rabbi Yochanan. Sorry, Rabbi Yona's son. So what's that machlokes? Whenever you see the phrases, kach lecha, asay lecha, v'yikchu elecha, are those phrases specific or not? To which Rabbi Yoshia will say yes. Kach lecha, asay lecha means it's coming from your own money. Whoever is being commanded, it's coming from your own personal funds. Right? V'yikchu elecha, communal funds. Rabbi Yona's son, not true. Not true. Whenever something happens in a communal setting, it's always coming from communal funds. What does Rabbi Yona's son then do with the Lashonos of Kach lecha, asay lecha? He says that's to express a more deeper sentiment by the Yibon Shalom. Son Kadosh Baruch Hu becomes upset with us. Kadosh Baruch Hu says to the manig, he says to the leader, to the Moshe, to Aaron, I'm so upset at Klal Yisrael. I don't want anything from them. Halavai, I should just have you serving me. I'm displeased with them, so I don't want their karbanos. I don't want their aron. It's more an expression, ultimately, again, of divine disfavor, divine displeasure than anything else. Interestingly enough, however, the follow-up to that machlokes is everyone will agree in two cases, in two situations, that the karbanos come from the personal pocket of the person offering it. What are the two examples? Miluim and Yom Kippur. Everyone agrees apparently that by the inauguration and by the service of Yom Kippur, by the inauguration, by the Miluim, the particular karbanos, the unique karbanos that were offered up came from Aaron's pocket, the Kohen Gadol's pocket, and by Yom Kippur, the unique karbanos for the Kohen Gadol ultimately come from his pocket as well. Interestingly enough. So we'll say, now back to our discussion. Rav Ashi Amar, Donin par lechatas v'ayel le'olah, mi par lechatas v'ayel le'olah. So we'll say, so now again remember, we're back to the pasuk. We're still trying to figure out what else can you include in the paradigm of hafrasha, of sequestering? So we're still up to Rosh Hashanah. So the Gemara says, I'll tell you why you can't go ahead and include Rosh Hashanah. Because Rabbi say, remember, in order to be included in the paradigm of Miluim, you have to resemble Miluim. Miluim had a par for chatos and an ayel for ola. Yom Kippur has the same thing. La fuke Rosh Hashanah va'aseres ditarvayu olos ninu. This comes to exclude Rosh Hashanah and Shavuos, which Rabbi say don't have a par for chatas and an ayel for ola, but rather have two olos. Ravina says, done in avoda v'kohen gadol me avoda v'kohen gadol. Remember, we learn out from the paradigmatic example of Miluim. Miluim was done, right? The avoda was done by the kohen gadol. So too for sequestering, we learn out other avodos done by the kohen gadol. For example, Yom Kippur, la fuke kulon kushyasan delav avoda b'kohen gadol minhu. Wow, Rabbi say that just destroyed everything in one fell swoop. Do you want to know why we can't include anything else? Why all the other examples don't work? Because Rabbi say on all the other examples, the avoda is not unique to the kohen gadol. Right? And Rosh Hashanah doesn't have to be the kohen gadol. Sukkot doesn't have to be the kohen gadol. Shavuos doesn't have to be the kohen gadol. The only two times that you needed the kohen gadol were where? Were ultimately Miluim and Yom Kippur. So therefore, if Miluim is going to serve as a paradigmatic example for the concept of sequestering, then it must resemble Miluim. Just like Miluim, the avoda can only be done by the Kohen Gadol, so to the only other circumstances in which we will have a din of sequestering is where the avoda can only be done by the Kohen Gadol. The Ikadami, we'll say others have a different approach. Ikadami, Amravina, done in avoda tchila, me avoda tchila. So this is very interesting. We go ahead and we learn out a first avoda from a first avoda. In other words, just like Miluim was a first avoda, the first time the avoda was done, so too the only other time you have a din of sequestering is also when something is a first. I will say, now what does that mean? Take a look at Rashi for just a moment. So the Gemara says, actually not yet, I'm sorry. My tchila, so what does that mean, a first? If you want to say it's first and that it can only be done by the Kohen Gadol, then ultimately, again, I will say, because remember, think about this just a moment. Miluim was the first time the Kohen Gadol went ahead and did the avoda, right? Yom Kippur is the first time the Kohen Gadol could go into the Kodesh HaKadoshim. If that's what you mean, then Hainu Kamaisa. That's the same thing as you just said before, right? You just said before that the unique link between Miluim and Yom Kippur is that the avoda is done by the Kohen Gadol. Ella, rather, what it means is avoda tchila b'makom me avoda tchila b'makom. Rather, also what you have to say is we learn out from Miluim, just like Miluim was the first time that the avoda was done in a particular place. What was the particular place? The Mishkan. So too, again, the paradigm says that also any other avoda which is done in a particular place for the first time, ultimately, again, also has a din of sequestering. What's pretty much the only other example of an avoda done in a particular place for the first time? Yom Kippur. Because what does that mean? What does it mean done in the place for our first time? The Kodesh HaKadoshim. Right? There's no other time that the Kohen Gadol goes into the Holy of Holies in the Kodesh HaKadoshim except for Yom Kippur. Incredible. Kiel Shabdimi Am Rabbi Yochanan Masni Chada Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi Masni Tardi. So it's very interesting. So when Rabbi Dimi came along, he said, Rabbi Yochanan went ahead and taught one ruling, and Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi taught two rulings. What does this mean? Here we go. Rabbi Yochanan Masni Chada La Sos Lechaper Elu Ma'aseh Kippurim. So we'll say, interestingly enough, Rabbi Yochanan, we'll say now we're coming full circle again. Right? So we have the pasuk from Miluim. Everyone's agreeing that Miluim is the paradigmatic example of sequestering. Rabbi Yochanan says, we only learn out one thing from Miluim. What's the one thing we learn from Miluim? One thing? Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur, just like Miluim had 7 days of sequestering for 1 day of avoda, so too Yom Kippur has 7 days of sequestering for 1 day of avoda. Rabbi Shimon Levi says, Masni Tarti. He learns out two things. La'asos, elu ma'aseh para. lechaper, elu mas Yom Kippurim. And Rabbi Shimon Levi says, no, we learn out two things. From the word lasos, we learn out para aduma. That for 7 days before doing the avodah of the para, you sequester. And ultimately, again, lechaper, that refers to Yom Kippur. So we'll say, machlokes now, how to darshan the pasuk. Rabbi Yochanan doesn't learn out paraduma. Rabbi Yochanan just learns out Yom Kippur, whereas Rabbi Yeshua Levi learns out both paraduma and Yom Kippur. So we'll say, watch this. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Yochanan, masni chada. We'll say, first wide line, Gimel Amud Beis. Rabbi Yochanan, masni chada. V'hanan tenan shivas yom kol Yom Kippurim, v'shivas yom kol Zeh Sapara. So the Gemara says, well, 1 second. Rabbi Yochanan only learns out, it's very exciting, Rabbi Yochanan only learns out Yom Kippur from the pasuk of Miluim. Here's the problem. We'll say, what's the problem? I have a Mishnah. And what does the Mishnah say? 7 days before Para Aduma, the Kohen is sequestered. So where are you learning that concept out from? I will say, again, when Rabbi Yochanan darshans the pasuk of Miluim, La'asos lechaper, he only sees in that Yom Kippur. He doesn't see any reference to Para Aduma. Fine. But the problem is, the Mishnah tells us that there is sequestering that is done prior to the avodah of Para Aduma. So Rabbi Yochanan, where do you learn that out from? So we'll say this is actually quite wild. To which Rabbi Yochanan responds, Ma'la ba'alma. Ma'la ba'alma. Well, so what does Ma'la ba'alma mean? It's just a chumrah that they imposed by Para Aduma. There's actually no halachic obligation of hafrasha, of sequestering, prior to the performance of the para. It's just a churma. Take a look at Rashi Ma'ala Ba'alma. Mipnei akal she'kilu ba'latame midas hakohen asarfa asuba ma'alas rabba. So Rabbi Yochanan will say this. This is about yesterday's daf. We'll say, remember again, who offered para aduma? Who offered para aduma? Kohen could do it. But what was the Kohen's ritual purity? I was saying this yesterday. What was the Kohen's ritual purity state? Tvul Yom. Tvul Yom. So remember again, we do that. Why? Why at Tvul Yom? Lahotzim miliban shel tzdukim. Excellent. So I'll say, so what you see in halacha is something dramatic. On one hand, we're going to employ a ridiculous kula. We're going to be actively metame a kohen. That's what we're doing. We're going to actively make a kohen tameh in order to show the tzdukim that they're wrong. That kohen is then going to go to the mikvah. He's going to do the avodah while he's at Tvul Yom. But what's the concern with this approach? The concern with this approach is that people are going to adopt a general laxity towards paraduma. So how do we counteract that? By employing a number of other chumras. For example, chumrah number 1 is you only use what kind of utensils? Right? Dung, stone, earth. Right? Clay avonim, clay gelalim, clay adama, kilim are not makabel tomar. Rabbi Yochanan will pass by another chumrah is we sequester the coin for 7 days. But Rabbi Yochanan will say it's not a biblical obligation. It's not learned that from Miluim, but rather, again, it's just simply a maila. It's just simply a chumrah in order that people should not come to treat para aduma laxly. So the Gemara goes right. V'ha'amar Rab Minyumi bar Chilki, Amar Rab Mechasya bar Idi, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, kasher aseh v'yom hazeh tziva Hashem lasos lechaper alechem lasos elu ma'aseh para lechaper elu ma'aseh Yom Kippurim. Yet Rabbi said this is incredible, but yet Rabbi Yochanan himself is on record as quoting this pasuk by Miluim and as quoting the phrase lasos to refer to paraduma. So what's going on over here? Rabbi say, what is going on over here? Right at the end, Rabbi Yochanan just said, no. The only thing we learn out from the Miluim is Yom Kippur. Lasos lechaper refers to Yom Kippur, and now Rabbi Yochanan is being quiet. And by the way, what about sequestering before paraduma? Ma'ila ba'alma. It's just a chumrah. Now Rabbi Yochanan is being quoted as darshaning lechaper refers to Yom Kippur, lasos refers to paraduma, which seems to indicate to us that the obligation for sequestering for prior to paraduma is a biblical obligation. So Rabbi Yochanan, which one is it? To which the Gemara says, Hahud Rabbeif. No. Rabbi Yochanan is quoting two opinions. One is his own opinion, one is his Rebbe's opinion. Rabbi Yochanan's own opinion is the only obligation for sequestering was by the Miluim, and from the Miluim we learn out Yom Kippur. There is no obligation to sequester by paraduma, and the only reason we do it is a chumrah for paraduma, so that people shouldn't be lax with paraduma. Rabbi Yochanan's Rebbe held that no, just like Yom Kippur is learned out from Miluim, so too paraduma is learned out from Miluim as well. Techi asa Rabin, Rabbi Yochanan, mishum Rabbi Yishmael, because when Rabin came along, Rabbi Yochanan said the name of Rabbi Yishmael is Rabbi. Lasos elu ma'aseh para. Therefore, it's the paraduma lechaper Elu Maaseh Yom Kippurim. And Lechaper ultimately again refers to Yom Kippur. So Rabbi say, turns out that Rabbi Yochanan is actually not contradicting himself. Rather, Rabbi Yochanan is espousing two opinions. His own opinion, right? His own opinion. And ultimately, again, the opinion of his Rebbe. Now, boss, you're thinking to yourself, but 1 second, how could a Talmud have a different opinion than his Rebbe? Because again, remember again, it's a Talmud's obligation to go ahead and learn from his Rebbe, but nothing stops the Talmud from espousing his own ideas, as long as those own ideas ultimately, again, are rooted in something. The Belzer Rebbe says something so truly beautiful on the pasuk in the Shira. Zeh keli va'anvehu. This is my God, and I will exalt him. Elokei avi va'arom menhu. The God of my father, and I will lift him up. So the Rebbe says so beautifully that there are two relationships with the Ribono Shel Olam. There's Elokei avi, the God of my father, and there's Zeh keli, my God. Each of us have two different relationships with the Ribono Shel Olam. There's an inherited relationship. Hopefully my parents instilled within me a proper ideology, a proper hashkafa. There's a certain Judaic identity that is instilled in me from the previous generation. That's Elokei Avi, that's the God of my father. But I also have an obligation of Zeh keli, to create my own relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu as well. It's not just, I don't just have inherited Yiddishkeit, I don't just have an inherited relationship. That's incredibly important. And that's the foundation. But what really makes me is my Zeh keli. What's my relationship with the Ribono Shel Olam? What's my identity? Who am I as a Jew? What's the neshama that I'm going to cultivate? So Rabbi Yochanan says, my Rebbe says this, but I cultivated a different opinion. Incredible. So the Gemara says, here, both of the Gemara is just quoting over here. This is more explicit. This is Rabbi Yochanan quoting in the name of Rabbi Shmuel his Rabbi. Amar li Reish Lakish Rabbi Yochanan, me'echa kayalfisla. So Reish Lakish says to Rabbi Yochanan, tell me, where did you learn this out from? Right? Where did you learn this out? So you know what? Actually, let's do one more line. So Reish Lakish says to Rabbi Yochanan, tell me. So remember again. So now what we have is Rabbi Yochanan himself saying that halacha l'maisa, the only thing we learn out from the Miluim is Yom Kippur. Right? Paraduma is not learned out from Miluim. Ultimately, Paraduma is a Chumrah. But yet, Rabbi Yochanan quotes his Rabbi Yishmael, as saying, no, both Paraduma as well as Yom Kippur learned that from Miluim. We'll stop here. Will the Mirat Hashem pick up with this Techi Asa Ravin, or Amar Le Yishlag Rabbi Yochanan Mirat Hashem tomorrow, and finish out the Sugi tomorrow. Shkar Chabosai.